The education of thousands of Australian school children is suffering. A report released by Anglicare Australia reveals that around 45,000 households accessing their emergency relief services don't have enough money to feed their families. Parents who can't afford to feed their children have resorted to keeping them home from school on days they cannot afford to put food in their lunchbox. This means that children are either going to school hungry or not going to school at all.
I think it's untenable that children in a prosperous Australia are going hungry. Around about 38% of the children in households were very food insecure, which meant they were going hungry, they were being forced to skip meals, their meal sizes were being cut down, and in around about 1 in 10 cases, children were actually going without meals for a whole day, at least once a week.
Ms. King's report, When There's Not Enough to Eat, talks about the impacts of poverty on a child's development and behaviour. Community organisations are recognising this and are running breakfast programs in schools to help.
There's certain children when we look at and we say their behaviour is a little bit off, and we're saying, what exactly have you had for breakfast today, or did you eat breakfast? So sometimes they haven't eaten breakfast, so that's why they're off, or they have eaten breakfast but it hasn't been a proper breakfast and it's been junk food, so that explains their behaviour.
I feel different when I don't have breakfast, but I feel happy when I do have breakfast and from the breakfast club.
According to the Australian Council of Social Services, 1 in 6 children in Australia are living in poverty. As a consequence, many parents cannot afford to feed their children and have to send them to school hungry. It's organisations and charities that run programs such as Breakfast Club that are doing something for these children. Taylor Denny, UTS.
Sociotheory. The conflict theory. There are inherent inequalities and they persist in our institutions such as education and are perpetuated by the powerful and the wealthy, reserving opportunity for those who are empowered. Power is the right to dictate reality. Schooling is informed by conflict and inequalities in the wider society. Poverty clearly shows this theory. As if you are a low socioeconomic status, that you do not get the same advantages as the others, and this is shown in education where students are left out. Symbolic interactionism. Individuals produce the social structures and institutions, and they are in a constant state of change through social interaction. Interactionists deal with how individuals and groups with social institutions are empowered to bring about the social change. Social society is always changing, especially when there are more students ending up on the streets and struggling because their parents cannot afford to get them an education or put a roof on their head. Most of these students are at the bottom of the social structure, and it is sad how they are disadvantaged over something that they cannot even help. In my community service, where I did it at McKellar Primary School, it was not in a high socio-economic status area, but it wasn't in a low either. It was quite in the middle. However, this was a school where kids that passed the disability test but weren't fit enough to go to school would go to this type of school, and it was quite sad to see as some students' parents didn't actually care about them and how they presented themselves to come to school. Most of them in their uniform had odd runners or odd socks, or runners that were worn out. Their soles had holes in the bottom of them, and their jumpers, you could tell, were ripped and holey because their elder siblings had them, or they just didn't take care of them or wash them to look after them enough, which was quite sad. The students' personalities were actually really shy as well. Some of them were quite outgoing because they were just quite bubbly, but the students who did have the worn-out soles and the used jumpers were quite shy and decided to stick to themselves and distance themselves from other students, which did not help them. And then also at McKellar, they made lunch before recess, which was beneficial for the students as they knew that some of the students didn't eat breakfast, so they needed some kind of protein and nutrition in them to learn and be motivated. So they had lunch at 10 o'clock and then recess at 1:30 to 2 o'clock. And even now, some of these kids didn't have their lunch or recess packed for them because their parents didn't care enough to pack it for them. The issue in school. When we put education first, we can reduce poverty and hunger, end the wasted potential, and look forward to stronger and better societies for all. This was by the United Nations Secretary General. Educating children is a key to ensuring a country's long-term development, prosperity, and independence. An educated population helps bring about a more vibrant civil society, as well as increasing the number of people available to offer their skills, knowledge, and expertise to support the development of their own communities. Affecting schooling. With poverty being so high in education and school, it is affecting their everyday learning. If a child has less than another student they do notice, then they will begin to feel different and that they don't belong. They will feel left out and not like all the other students. It then affects their learning as they are not motivated to learn, and then they fall behind the class even more. All of this for something that they cannot change or help. Once it affects their schooling, it then affects them outside of school. It affects their personality by the student not being able to be confident and them turning to be shy and distancing themselves from others. By distancing themselves, they lose friends and struggle to go through school. It is just one big snowball effect. Now here are some interesting facts that are international and about Australia about poverty. That there is a student dropping out of school every 26 seconds. Worldwide, nearly 900 million people cannot read or write, so they are illiterate. Nearly half of the world's population, more than 3 billion people, live on less than $2.50 a day. More than 1.3 billion people live in extreme poverty, less than $1.25 a day. In 2011, 165 million children under the age of 5 were stunted, reduced rate of growth and development due to chronic malnutrition. One of the solutions, and we need more charities like these, is the United World Schools, also known as UWS. UWS is an independent charity providing the opportunity to read and write and count to children who have been denied the access to education. The UWS, with the UN, believes that all children have a fundamental right to free primary school of good quality. The statistics remain bleak. 59 million children are out of school, with conflict-affected countries, and girls are highlighted as the greatest of the disadvantaged. Here are some charities that help with the poverty and some solutions to people on the streets. And if we donated more, it would be much appreciated and helped in the wider society. The Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, Anglicare, the Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul Society, and many more.